has gone up very, very fast, tripled in the Reagan years, still going up fast. Health and education and welfare are deteriorating. In fact, profits are going through the roof, or they were until the middle of this year. In the middle of this year, the fairy tale economy, as it's called, which was it was a fairy tale for a few percent of the population, that finally began to, the crises began to hit the rich and the wealth and the privileged. So it made the front pages. Now it's a front page story that the global economy is in trouble, because it's not just the 80% of the population who've been suffering from it in the rich countries and even more elsewhere, but it's also the top few percent who are benefiting from it. They're facing problems. Markets are extremely volatile and unpredictable. Financial markets, nobody understands. They're governed by what's called panics, manias, and crashes in the international economics literature, and they're all totally unpredictable. Nobody knows what's going on. And that's now threatening the rich. They're afraid of a global meltdown that'll hurt them as well. So there now are calls for reinstitution of Bretton Woods, re-regulation of capital, and they're coming from the most conservative sectors. So the World Bank, the Bank for International Settlements, which is, the rich men, the bankers' bank, basically. It's the bank of the central bankers, the most conservative institution you can find, has been calling for it, has also been warning that one should have humility in discussing international economic affairs. It's their term. You should have humility because nobody has an idea about what's going on. It's totally out of control, as they recognize, and now dangerous because it's threatening rich people. So you see it on the front pages. Well, there's nothing, as I say, in the third world it's mostly disastrous. And it is as well for most of the population at home. In the United States, it's remarkable. I mean, there's all this talk about a fairy tale economy, but if you take a look at it, the top, say, few percent of the population have been doing fantastically well. If you get, and the top 10% in income sort of getting by, when you get to the next 10%, the 80th to 90th percent, they've actually lost net wealth during the fairy tale economy, meaning that debts have grown faster than assets. And when you get down below the top, the 80th percentile, it's mostly racing to try to stay even if you possibly can. That's the great Goldilocks economy that everyone's talking about. It's also the slowest recovery in U.S. economic history, and unprecedented in that it's left out most of the population. And the reasons are understood. So the reasons are understood to be what Alan Greenspan calls greater worker insecurity. Workers are intimidated. They're afraid that jobs will be transferred. The unions have been destroyed by simply refusing to enforce the laws. And that makes workers insecure, so they don't ask for raises, and that improves the health of the economy, gives you a fairy tale economy for the people who count. Now, they happen to be the ones who are writing the articles, which is why you read about it, but it's not true of the population. And now, as I say, it's beginning to hit the rich, so there's a lot of concern about what to do. Well, there's nothing inevitable about all of this. These are not the results of economic laws or laws of nature or anything. They're political decisions, very specific decisions taken by groups that happen to have the power to impose their will through often non-governmental institutions like the international financial institutions and others, which carry out their work more or less in secret, or simply through corporate power. Corporations are tyrannies, private tyrannies, which are unaccountable to the public, which administer trade, so it's not free trade, and involved in all kind of alliances with one another and have enormous impact on state policy, obviously. Those decisions are leading to a certain form of globalization. It doesn't have to take that form. I mean, it could take other forms. The globalization is by no means out of control. You look at trade and investment flows and that sort of thing. The great majority is among countries which have parliamentary institutions. Europe, United States, and Japan. And they have no fear of a military coup, which means that in principle, policies can be changed even within existing mechanisms. It's a matter of taking control of what's effectively, at least in principle, ought to be under your control. That requires understanding what's going on, of course, and breaking through the web of propaganda and secrecy and so on, but that's by no means impossible, especially for relatively privileged people. And in these societies, a large part of the population is relatively privileged and can do quite a lot about it and make choices. Furthermore, that's within the framework of existing institutions, and there's nothing holy about them. Institutions are not self-legitimizing. They have to face the test of legitimacy. That's true of kings and princes and slave owners and the Stalinist state and corporate structures or any other form of tyranny and domination. Has to prove that it's legitimate. And if it's not legitimate, it can be dismantled, exactly as has happened throughout history. That's why there's maybe agonizingly slow but definitely detectable progress in history, progress to a more humane world. And that hasn't ended. It's a matter of choice. And if institutions have to be dismantled and modified and democratized, those are choices that are surely within the hands of the public, as they have always been in the past.